Hi, folks. Today I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I maintain a compact board game collection. So, this is my collection. It's about 23 games, and my collection tends to stay around that sort of 20 to 30 game level. I got rid of quite a few games at the end of last year, getting rid of a few this year, and ultimately what it comes down to in terms of maintaining a compact board game collection is two things: input and output. Which games do you put into your collection? Which games do you take out of your collection? And um, in terms of output, getting rid of games, which is, I think, something that a lot of board gamers have to go through quite frequently. And I've seen quite a few people post about a bit of a sort of New Year's cleanup in the beginning of January. And I think for me, the way that I do this primarily is do I like the game? If I don't really like the game, why keep it? And the more nuanced way that I look at clearing out my collection is probably, do I feel inspired to bring the game off the shelf? Does the board game spark joy to sort of reference a very popular social phenomenon in terms of tidying that's been going on right now? Back to board gaming specifically. Do you feel inspired to take those games off the shelf? When you look at them, do you just think, I can't really be bothered? Or do you think, yay, I really want to play that game? So I think that's the difference in terms of getting rid of those games. There's another category which is perhaps sentimental games where you don't really want to play it, you don't feel motivated to play it, but you've got certain memories attached to the game, and you don't want to get rid of it for that reason, and I think that's fine. And just to be very clear, even though I believe in kind of minimalism, I was a minimalist before I got into board gaming, 4 years ago, and I've always tried to take that approach of being mindful about the items that I own. I'm one of those people that if I have too much clutter, too many things, it does actually stress me out. It does weigh on me. It does bother me. I don't like looking at a big stack of items and having to mentally parse where those items belong and how I want to use them, or how how they fit into my life. So minimalism was something that I had embraced before I started board gaming, and for me it works. But if you have a huge amount of space and you enjoy collecting board games, fine. Everybody has to find the number that works for them, and there's no real judgment implied in any of my content or in this video. But again, if you're looking to clear out, if you're looking to thin your collection and get rid of games, I think those are a couple of approaches. Another way is to very easily create like an ABC list. A is must keep, B is ambivalent, and C is must get rid of. And then see how you work through that. Even getting rid of just the C column of games, the games that you want to get rid of, can be quite liberating and maybe give you a bit of that breathing space that you need to sort of feel a bit more relaxed and happy with your collection. So that's the output side of things. How do you get rid of games? In terms of how I practically get rid of games, there's a couple of ways that I do that. Firstly, I donate games to local charity shops. If a game perhaps I don't think I can sell online, or it's just, maybe I just want to get it out of my collection quickly to free up some room, I'll take it down to a charity shop. The other way is selling online. That's the primary method that I've used to pass my games on. I did use things like Amazon and eBay at the beginning. Amazon's fees are just way too high, although you do get exposure to quite a big audience there, so you'll tend to be able to sell games more quickly. eBay works pretty well, but the audience isn't quite as interested in board games, especially sort of lesser known games or games that aren't like the most recent Kickstarter hotness. So that's one other channel. And then most recently, and perhaps most effectively, I found the Board Game Geek Marketplace to be a really good channel to sell my board games. And actually, as I've been taking part in a board gaming club here in London over the past few months, that club has an online forum where they do trade and sell games. So I've actually found that a pretty good way to get rid of a lot of good games in person without the hassle of postage and packaging. Although usually you lose quite a bit on your initial investment on those games. You tend to have to heavily discount them to sell the games. Sorry, just grabbing a sip of coffee there. But so that's kind of the output side of things. Now let's look at the input. So how do you get games into your collection? And for me, I tend to do a huge amount of research about the games that I bring into my collection before I bring them in. That doesn't always mean that they're going to be perfect games, but I very rarely buy more than one game at one time. I very rarely make impulse buys of games. I usually have watched lots of walkthroughs of game and research particularly how suitable a game is to play at two. So historically, I've been in the hobby since about 2015. I've done most of my board gaming at 2-player. Only more recently have I started to play more 4 and 5-player games at my sort of weekly gaming night. And that's changed my calculations a little bit because now I'm thinking about which games might work well at a gaming night, let alone to play 2-player at home with my wife. And so that research at the front end is really important. And the kind of things I look at are weight. To play at home with my wife, I don't want a game that's crazy difficult to learn or teach. I don't want a game that's crazy long in terms of length, although games like Terraforming Mars sort of push the limits of the kind of games that are comfortable to play at home. Although my wife, particularly really enjoys Terraforming Mars now. It's probably our most played game. But I have to be quite careful about which kind of games I want to bring in, and super heavy games would probably be out of consideration. But at the same time, even for my gaming night, super heavy games probably don't make sense either, simply because I don't really have a regular gaming group at these gaming nights. It's a huge gaming group. It has thousands of members here in London. I think it's probably one of the biggest board gaming clubs in the world. And every week you're going to be playing with different people potentially. You're going to be in a scenario where you're going to be teaching people that you don't know a new game. You don't necessarily know which teaching styles they respond to or which teaching styles that they find the most effective. So rocking up with a super complex Euro, that you want to teach to a bunch of strangers, especially on a work night, in the week, is not the easiest thing to do. So there again, mid-weight games can perhaps work better than heavier games, unless you're joining a game with somebody who really knows how to play the game well and can teach it very fluently. So those are some of the considerations, some of the variables that I look at the front end, on the input end of which games I'm going to buy. Some recent purchases I made are Clans of Caledonia, War Chest, and 1906 San Francisco. So why did I make those particular purchases? Why did I add those games to my collection? So Clans of Caledonia is a game that I've had my eye on for a very long time, and the reason for that is because it's a very well respected game. People have rated it quite highly, and also in the best possible way, it seems like a bit of a Frankenstein game, whereby it's got a number of components or gameplay mechanisms from other games. People compare it to things like Terra Mystica, which I haven't played. And they're supposed to be, admittedly by the designer of Clans of Caledonia himself, has said that he's borrowed game mechanism elements from other games like Terra Mystica and Navigador. So my thinking here was that I could probably get exposure to flavors or elements of a number of different Euro games in a single game package. Speaking of game packages, this game also has an amazingly compact board game box, which I absolutely love, because it means I can pack more board game onto a smaller space, and when you've got literally one board game shelf, that makes a difference. Of course, I wish I could say that about the next game I purchased, which is War Chest, which takes up the vertical space of at least two regular board games. But the reason I got this one is because I'd previously played Onitama quite a bit at home with my wife, and we both quite enjoyed it, but it did seem to get a little bit predictable after a while. And by that I mean you could kind of see, because you've got these same hand of cards moving around that dictate which moves you can make in Onitama, the game just felt a little bit repetitive. And I, despite really being charmed by the design and the sort of components of the game, I just felt like I had to sort of move it out of my collection. War Chest seems to me like it might be a step up from that, and it might give that sort of classical chess-like experience. I used to play a lot of chess when I was a kid. My wife's played a lot of more classical strategy games in her younger days as well. So having at least one abstract strategy game in the collection is an important thing for me, and I'm hoping that War Chest, again, I haven't played it yet, I've just got this last week, hopefully this can be a game that fills in that strategic gap in my collection. And the nice thing is it actually also plays apparently quite well at 4. So again, if I enjoy this at home and I can learn to play it pretty well, I can potentially bring it to gaming nights and teach it to new people that I haven't played with before potentially. So that's really good. 1906 San Francisco is a small size game, really small box. I've actually done an unboxing on my YouTube channel you can check out. But I saw this on heavy cardboard. I'd heard about it over the last year. The artwork I found really charming for this game, and it's supposedly a thinky filler. So it's a sub 1 hour game, but it looks pretty straightforward. And if it can deliver that kind of crunch of a more complex game with a smaller footprint and a smaller weight of rules, complexity to learn, that's really interesting to me. Again, this could be one that I could play at 2, perhaps with my wife at home, or if I like it, I can rock it up to a gaming night and teach it to new people, and it may be a game that we can comfortably teach, learn, and get played within an evening during the work week. So that's those are 3 recent purchases. Mintworks, Arboretum, and Archaeology are 3 other games that I purchased just before Christmas. I haven't gotten to try these guys out yet either. But again, Mintworks is a game that it's a small, transportable, travel-friendly worker placement game that actually looks kind of fun. I haven't tried it yet, but it does look kind of fun. Arboretum and Archaeology, I'm not so sure about. I've heard a lot of good things about these games. They were super hard to get for the longest period of time, up until a couple of months ago when they got republished in newer editions, but I'm happy to try them out. In terms of my collection, what I try to do is fill in gaps or categories with at most 1 or 2 games. So in terms of, like, let's say the worker placement slots, I've got Architects of the West Kingdom, which is a bit more of a meaty, it's not a heavy game, but it's definitely like a meatier, more satisfying mid-weight worker placement game that has a really good AI component. You can play with a deck of AI cards that you can use to enhance a 2-player game, make it a 3-player game, or play solo, which is quite nice. And the only other real worker placement game I have is Targi, which is a really nice, very sort of classical Euro-flavored worker placement game for 2. Terraforming Mars is a heavier game that I own, and it's card drafting and tableau building and engine building, and I don't really have any other game that fits very neatly into that category. So that's kind of maintaining that slot in my collection for the time being. The Resistance, the sort of mandatory social deduction game, although I'm not really massively interested in keeping that in my collection for much longer. Pandemic Fall of Rome is obviously filling the pandemic slot of my collection. Pandemic is probably the game, and this is in all its different incarnations that I've played the most. It was kind of my gateway game into the hobby, and I don't actually own any of the other games in the Pandemic series now, but Fall of Rome, is one that I've recently got. I got it before Christmas, and I've really enjoyed it because it's got the familiar Pandemic flavor, but it adds a little bit of difference in terms of there's dice play in the game to determine how you clear the cubes from the board, although in this game they're barbarians. But, that fills a nice spot in terms of co-op games as well. So, again, I'm trying to look at not having too many overlapping games in a similar category. Codenames, pretty fun party game. Again, I'm not too bothered about keeping this game in my collection, but, it serves a purpose. Lost Cities is kind of the sentimental game because I have an older copy of this game, which I've played quite a few times. Although it doesn't see as much table time as it used to, it's one that I think I'm going to have a bit of a harder time letting go of. Castles of Burgundy, the card game. I haven't actually played this game very much, and it's potentially one that I'm going to let go, but I kind of got it as a way of filling this sort of classical Euro game slot in my collection. The Mind is a game that I wanted to try out. I'm not a super big fan of The Mind. People say you either love The Mind or you hate The Mind. I'm kind of in between. I'm pretty lukewarm about it. So it's not one that I'm, super desperate to get out of my collection because it's so small in terms of taking up space on my shelf. But I'm not going to be upset to let it go really either. As opposed to Flamme Rouge, which has been one of my most beloved game acquisitions over the past year. It works super well with non-gamers. It works really well with gamers as well. I've played it at board gaming nights. I've played it with family members, and it's just a really fun racing game. Again, I don't have any other game that fits in that kind of category. I don't have any other racing games, so Flamme Rouge fills that slot. There's a few other interesting race games out there that I've seen, Snow Tales in particular, but I'd be quite hesitant to get one of those games while I'm enjoying Flamme Rouge so much. Star Cartel I haven't really played, and this is perhaps a good example of where I've done a bad job in terms of researching the games I put into my collection, because Star Cartel officially only plays 3 players at a minimum, and I think up to 5 or 6 players at the top end. But even though there is a 2-player variant, I just haven't really tried this one out, and it's one that I don't feel motivated to play at home. And when I bring it to board gaming nights, people are just like, don't know if we want to really play that. So this is probably not long for my collection either, quite frankly. So I should have probably done a bit of better job researching that game before I got it into my collection in the first place. Las Vegas is a really fun game. I played a lot over Christmas and New Year's with family and friends, and it's just a super fun dice chucking game, which is very easy to teach, and I think even has a little bit more strategy and tactics to it than perhaps is initially apparent. Century Spice Road, actually just going back to Las Vegas again, I don't really have any kind of rambunctious dice chucker games. I don't own King of Tokyo or anything like that, so I feel like Las Vegas has filled in that kind of funner, more sort of party style dice chucking game. So I'm happy with that staying in my collection for the time being. Century Spice Road is a light game. It's got a nice bit of engine building to it. I've played it a huge number of times as well with my wife. She really enjoys it. You can move in and out of it really quickly. And it's one that I'm really interested in keeping in my collection for the time being, especially because I'm considering how it might work if I extend the range of Century games I have with something like Eastern Wonders, or perhaps the unannounced 3rd game in the series. So I'm quite curious to keep that one in the collection for the time being. Clank in Space I haven't played a huge number of times, but it's got that great sort of combination of deck building and board play, which I think works really well. Lindisfarne I haven't actually tried out yet. It's a review copy of a game that I need to get played and reviewed. Architects of the West Kingdom we spoke about. Critical Mass is a really fun deck building game, which I've actually posted a review of on my YouTube channel, so check that out. And as I said, these 3 games I haven't played, nor have I actually played these 3 games: Clans of Caledonia, War Chest, or San Francisco. So the last thing I wanted to show you guys was a game that I have on my Horizons, or on my long range radar, which is Valeria Card Kingdoms. And the reason why I have this game on my long range radar to perhaps add into my collection is because it fills another gap, which is this sort of dice game where Machikoro style, where somebody rolls and everybody gets some sort of resource. I did actually own Machikoro in the past. I liked it at first, but it fell flat pretty quickly. I've since played Space Base, which I've really enjoyed. but it's a little bit of a cumbersome game. It's a little bit longer than I'd like it to be, and I understand that it doesn't play amazingly well at 2, whereas a lot of people seem to think that Valeria Card Kingdoms actually does play better at 2. So this kind of game could offer me flexibility in terms of being one that I can play at home and one that I can bring to a board gaming night and play quite comfortably with people I have to teach the game to and have a fun time with. And I really quite enjoy that sort of mechanism of somebody rolling dice and everybody getting something on their turn. And the artwork here from D'Amico, the artist D'Amico, who's done all the sort of raiders and architects of the West Kingdom artwork, is really cool. So that's an example of a game that I've got on my long range horizon that I'm thinking about bringing into my collection. Another game I'm actually thinking about very seriously is Wingspan, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. And the reason why I'm thinking about this game is because it may offer me a sort of lighter, more accessible version of the Terraforming Mars experience that I get, which, although I quite enjoy, Terraforming Mars is a long game, and you really have to be committed to pulling that one off the shelf and sitting down and playing it for an hour and 40 minutes, an hour and 30 minutes, whatever it may be, even longer if you're playing with more people. But if I can get that kind of tableau, combo-tastic flavor from a simpler game, that could be really interesting. And I think the theme could give this game a slightly broader appeal. Also, the lower complexity level of this game compared to Terraforming Mars. I think Terraforming Mars is somewhere in the 3-point-something range, whereas the weight here is 2.6. I think that could also make it a very good game for board gaming nights as well, if I want to introduce it to new people. So that's another one that I'm seriously looking at now to add to the collection. I think more broadly, and in terms of closing up this video, you can see here that now my collection is around the 25, 23 level in terms of number of core games, not including expansions. But I've probably owned over 100 games. And so, you can tell very quickly from the mathematics of that I've had to get rid of a lot of board games in my time playing. And that's kind of a tiring and time-consuming task. So one of my objectives for 2019 is to try and stabilize my board game collection. I think it's taken me some time over the past few years of being in the hobby to figure out which games I like. There's still some genres of games that I haven't tried yet. And there's still some games, there's obviously thousands and thousands of games that I haven't tried and probably will never try. But there's still some major designers whose games I haven't tried. There's still some major publishers whose games I haven't tried. So I think, 2019 will be sort of a combination of exploring more games, but also trying to stabilize my board game collection with games that I can play more frequently. And I think you guys are probably familiar with this sort of 10 by 10 challenge that a lot of people have posted about on social media, which is, play 10 games 10 times each. And I think that's a really worthy concept and objective. And I'd like to try and apply that to some of the games in my collection. And that will invariably mean buying less games into my collection, but playing the games I have more often. And so that's another objective I have. And, in terms of social media trends, there was a very popular post that went around Twitter towards the end of the last year, I think, called Which 7 Games? And the idea was like, if you could only own 7 board games, which would they be? I kind of take inspiration from that, being, a board game minimalist and somebody who's passionate about minimalism in general. I kind of, took inspiration from that again, and it got me thinking about, which 7 games would I keep? And could I actually get my collection down to 7 games? I'm not saying that I necessarily will get my collection down to 7 games. That's pretty extreme by most people's standards, but I don't think it's impossible. So that's a thought process that's going through my head over the next year as I bring more games into my collection and let games go. I'll keep you guys updated on my progress. I'll try and share more videos about games that I've gotten rid of and new games that I'm bringing into my collection. But hopefully this gives you a bit of an insight into how I manage my games, how I manage my collection, and which new games I'm bringing in, and which games I'm letting go of. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. In the meantime, enjoy your gaming, and thank you very much.